Hey everybody, welcome back to Genesis Office Hours. This is episode number 39, and I'm your host, Carrie Dills, coming today with a very special guest to bring you some fantastic information. His name is Brian Richards, but you may also know him on Twitter as Risen, at Risen. Brian, how you doing?
I am doing well. I've spent the last 7 days feeling quite unwell, so I am thrilled to actually be upright again.
Speaking of upright, every profile picture I've ever seen of you is you hanging upside down.
Yeah, that's how I spend most of my time, actually. It's a byproduct, I think, of developing really complex problems. Or I should say, really complex solutions to very simple problems.
It's like
Which is
gravity boots.
most of what web development is, right?
Indeed. Well, I want to, before we start diving into questions here, just want to introduce, say thank you to everybody who's tuning in live right now. If you would like to ask questions or send in comments, you can do that via Twitter using the hashtag GOHChat. You can also check out the show notes later for this podcast at carriedeals.com/podcast/WP-sessions-39. That was kind of ridiculous, but I'll be sure and put that in the, I'll tweet that out later so you don't have to remember it. If you're listening after the fact on iTunes or SoundCloud, I appreciate you doing that. So, all right, we'll stop with the preamble and get down to business. So, Brian, I was stalking you online a little bit. Don't be scared. And did I read correctly that you have a photography degree?
I do, yeah. That's how I cut my teeth in the world. No, really. I got a photography degree because by the time I was ready to go to college, I'd already been noodling around with web design and development for 7 years, and so I was aware enough to know that any college program focusing on web design probably wasn't going to be teaching me anything new, at least not for a while, and that was not interesting to me. And I thought, hey, photography sounds kind of interesting, so while I figure out what I want to do, I'll make myself a photo major so I can take all the photo classes. And turns out I loved it and stuck with it and graduated without having to do much homework of any kind. 2 thumbs way up. Great strategy.
All right. Well, how did you make your transition then into web development? Or you mentioned you were already doing that before you pursued your degree, but how did you even get into web development in the first place?
Yeah, so I kind of happened to cross it by accident. I was tooling around on the internet in elementary school, and just as I switched into middle school, I discovered that I could right-click and view source and see the code that makes websites work. I thought, wow, I could probably do this. And so I hopped into a Yahoo chat room and started asking around and got someone to help me set up a tripod website for free, and they put up a page, and then I looked at the source that they wrote and started copying, pasting, figuring it out from there. And then as the years progressed, I discovered Photoshop and started playing around with that. Really big fan of graphic design, which then led to my interest in photography. And so I started doing stuff for other people. Right? I made a website for an auctioneer family in my hometown. Made a website for a mod for Half-Life 1. It was a GoldenEye Half-Life mod. That one was pretty cool. Then I started making websites for some other clients, made one for my school district, went away to college, picked up a job at a design agency that was several hours away, commuted there, a 3-hour drive, got my briefing, came home, worked on it, and then after a while they're like, no, we need you in the office. So I would commute 3 hours, work, commute an hour to stay with a cousin, an hour back. That was terrible. I eventually lost that job because the commute was awful, and I was very grateful to be rid of it. And that taught me a lot about running my own business. And so now I posit that you have to work for the man before you can be the man, because there were so many things that I didn't know about web design before working for them that I'm so glad that I had that opportunity. You know, things like invoicing clients for all of the time that I'm spending on a project, including time on the phone with them, time in email with them, time contemplating the design decisions that I'm making. And that's kind of how it all went from there to now. Has been basically freelance to agency work.
You have to work for the man before you can be the man. I love that. Well, you brought up a point that I think a lot of our listeners can identify with, and that's that struggle of how do you appropriately account for your time. It's not just a matter of hours spent to develop. You do have to include that administrative time of communication with the client, et cetera, et cetera. Any advice to someone who's not as far along in their freelancing career of how to manage that? I mean, do you just say, okay, I'm going to add 30% of time to account for the admin portion, or? Oh, you're muted. I think you were saying something great, but we couldn't hear it.
I was saying the most amazing thing, and now I don't even remember what it was. Sorry, everybody. No, I would say that in my experience, every time I put together a proposal, I will break it down as granularly as I can and put. I would look at my time in terms of half days, right? Can I do this in a half day? Yes, okay, so that's 4 hours, but it's probably going to take me 8 hours, so I'll double it because there's always something that goes wrong, right? And I get this nice, complete thing, and then I usually add another half on top of that. So I take my initial estimate, double it, get everything together, add another half, and usually that's about enough time. And I had a hard time early on, like, you don't want to add line items when you're invoicing clients that said 15-minute phone call, 20 minutes in email, 1 hour sitting around just looking at websites, because they're going to go, why are you billing me for this? But if you bulk all of that together under something like project management or research and development, they understand that, right? They don't need to know that you were surfing around, picking up inspiration. You were learning about how to implement the best technique for what it is you're trying to accomplish here. But it is all billable time, right? You wouldn't be spending that time if it wasn't for a client project. So, yeah, don't feel bad billing for it.
Good advice. I learned a while back not to do the line item because it encourages, especially on the proposal side, don't offer that line item because it encourages people to say, well, I don't think I really need that. Let's cut this off and save, $200 or whatever it is. So yeah, cheers, 3 cheers for lumping, and you can take that in whatever context you want to. Twitter. All right, so you are in. My other stalkings, I saw that you've been around WordPress since 2007, and that was 2.1?
2.3, I think, is when I started, because I didn't get in until around November of 2007. Yep.
And then you're a core contributor. How long did it take before you started digging into WordPress and giving back?
3.5, I believe, was the first version where I actually contributed. I was very intimidated by track. I didn't want to submit any ticket and then realize that, oh, someone else had already been talking about this, or didn't want to submit a patch and then realize, like, oh, you totally spelled this wrong. What are you doing? Get out of here. Until, I think it was maybe WordCamp Philly, 2011, possibly, or 2012. They had a contributor day. And I actually got to sit down, and I think Nason was there, and Aaron Jorbin was there, and all of these people who do contribute to core regularly. And I realized that just how simple of a thing it was, right? If you post a thread in track that someone else has already had, Sergey is going to come along and say this is a duplicate, and there's no need to be embarrassed. You just hop onto that other thread and start helping solve there. If you post a patch that has a problem in it, someone will say, hey, fix this, and you fix it, and look, you've learned something, and you've helped make WordPress better. So it's a really great learning experience.
Love that. And just mention, in case anybody's listening that has been pondering a contribution to core, there's actually over on WordPress.org, I'll have to tweet the exact link later, but it has suggested or good, I can't think of exactly what it's phrased, but good first time.
Good first bug, I think is what it's called.
Yes, good first bug. So if you're a brand new contributor, there's some sort of a softball if you will, task that you can kind of cut your teeth on. So.
Yeah, and if you're not interested in contributing code, if you go to make.wordpress.org, there are loads of other ways to contribute. In fact, I did the most significant strides helping with the documentation team a little more than a year ago, and that didn't require any code at all. There's translations, there's lots and lots of ways to make the WordPress experience better beyond code.
Got a question here, and it's kind of a follow-up to what we were talking about with pricing. We've talked a lot on this show about value-based pricing as opposed to flat fee or hourly based. Are you familiar with that concept or ever pondered using it?
Yeah, I really like conceptually value-based pricing because I think it helps us as developers to recognize the value that we're providing. I don't know if it works in every context, but it definitely sits well with me, at least philosophically. Usually the way that I quote projects is I figure out my hourly rate, right, and then I figure out how many hours it's going to take, but then when I bid is a flat rate. And then I base that, as I said, I'll increase it because I know that my hours are way off, and then I'll tweak it based on how valuable the project is to the client. As we have a lot of money to spend on things like making the best web experience, and so they value that a lot. And if you come in with a bid that's really low because you think, hey, I'm going to win because I'm the cheapest, they might just throw it out because they're going to like, oh, this guy can't possibly know what he's doing because his bid is suddenly $10,000 lower than everybody else. However, at the opposite end of the spectrum, a small business, local business, doesn't yet realize how instrumental an incredible web experience is, and so they might not yet value what you have to provide. And so part of that is educating them on, hey, here's how much I'll be able to increase your ROI. Here's how many more leads we'll be able to get, and how I'm going to work to improve your bottom line. So,
what's your typical project that you work on?
I don't know. I have not had a typical in a long time. I've spent the last 2 years or so in agency work. I worked at WebDev, and that was a lot of fun, WebDev Studios, because we got to build projects for lots of really cool clients like Microsoft and Time and the YMCA, and that exposed me to an entire development world that I hadn't yet seen prior to that. Now I'm working part-time with Crowd Favorite, and it's the same sort of deal, working with really cool, really big people. And I'm not sure who I can and can't say yet because I've only been there for a little over a week, so I'm just going to keep my lips sealed. And then I occasionally help friends with their WordPress sites. Sometimes they're small. Some of them, I have one friend who has 3 different sites. They're all WooCommerce. They all sell a single product, and they all generate hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. So it's a small project, but it's a huge impact for him. And then, of course, anytime I'm not doing those things, I'm working on WP sessions. And so my average day fluctuates greatly, from personal work to training and education to work for friends to enterprise clients and everything in between.
Well, that's a good segue because you brought up WP Sessions, and I want to talk a lot about that. So you were at WebDev Studios for a couple of years as a lead developer, and then you transitioned. Were you already working on WP Sessions at that point, and then transitioned full-time over to that? Or
Yes. So the idea hit me a year before I left, is when I started WP Sessions, and it came to me because I was working on a project and I really needed to know better how to write more performant queries. Right, I'd been using the WP query class, and that wasn't cutting it for the type of stuff that we were doing. So I was exploring WPDB, and I was wishing that I understood MySQL better so I could understand, like, what's the best way to structure this data so that we can get it most efficiently and not burn down the website as tons of traffic starts flowing in. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if I could just pay someone for an hour to sit down and say, okay, here are the essentials that you need to know to make the most out of what you're trying to do right now. And I thought, man, yeah, and it'd be great if I could get a few other people to watch, because I know lots of people who'd be interested in this too. Maybe I could sell some tickets, and then it wouldn't really cost any of us too much, and then the person speaking could get paid. And I threw the idea out because I'm like, that's not going to work. And then 4 days later, I'm like, no, I have to do this. I registered the domain, contacted about 50 people that I knew in the WordPress community, and said, hey, would you ever be interested in something like this? And all of them said, yes, absolutely. When do you want me to start? I'm like, I don't know, but I'll ping you later. And that's how it began.
Awesome. Well, for folks that aren't familiar with WP Sessions, do check it out, WPSessions.com, and it's membership-based. Well, you can either purchase a ticket for a particular session or get a VIP membership with access to everything, and all kinds of courses. Pippin recently did one on your first WordPress plugin. There's one on SaaS, building a membership site, all kinds of really cool courses. But Brian, what would you say differentiates WP Sessions from other online learning tools like Treehouse or Lynda or WP 101?
Yeah, so the primary difference is that it's predominantly live training. It's more like a small digital WordCamp than it is an online training library. I'm starting to move into that territory with the VIP memberships and adding the courses and lots of other content, but it got started with these live monthly events, and that's still what it's been doing for about 1.5 years now. This month, we're actually joining forces with WordSesh. I'm going to help Scott Bosgard there with wrangling all of the live broadcasts using some of the tech that I developed for my site. But yeah, I guess that was a very long answer to say the biggest difference is that it's live, and the other biggest difference is that I'm pulling in community members and experts that most people have already heard of, rather than me teaching everything or just finding anybody who's available. I have made a point to go out and find people like Brad Williams and Dre Armeda and Chris Lemma and Corey Miller, et cetera, et cetera.
So what is your process for selecting a topic? I mean, is it first you go out and seek the talent that you just mentioned, and then go backwards to pick a topic they're fluent in, or vice versa?
Sometimes it happens that way. When I started, I made a list of a bunch of topics that I wanted to learn more about, and that I thought the vast majority of other developers who are just like starting to go out on their own, beyond 101, but not quite like 400 level, right? Somewhere in like the 201 skill level. And then I approached about, like I said, 50 different people, and then found where each of those fit. And that took me through the first year. And then I had lots of feedback from my viewers of, I want to learn more about this, and I want to learn more about this. So then I started seeking out the people who explicitly knew those things. I had lots of people, for example, say, I want to learn more about performance, and I want to hear about what Zach Tolman did in greater detail, because he published that really long blog post on the Theme Foundry blog of, here's everything that I did that makes this site super crazy fast without a content delivery network. And he obliged. So he's actually recording a full-length course. It's probably going to be about 2 hours by the time he's done, of just straight-on performance-based development. Server-side tweaks, front-end tweaks, things that you need to be worried about in your theme and your plugins and everything in between. So.
You mentioned something earlier, and by the way, sorry if you're hearing weird beeps. Every time I unmute myself, Google Apps is trying to get me to upgrade my app, which I'm not going to do mid-podcast, but fun with Google Hangouts. You mentioned that you pay your speakers, which in the WordPress world, or traditionally with WordCamps, those are speakers donating their time. And lately we've seen a trend with conferences like Pressnomics and
LoopConf.
Yes, thank you. That are paying speakers for their time. So how is that, or how did you come about to, or decide on that model to pay your speakers?
That was my plan from the start. I don't like asking people to do things for free, particularly to put together a high-quality presentation. And I know that an event like a WordCamp is different, and I know that the ethos there is you're contributing back to the community, and you're getting a ton of great exposure and raising your own presence and people's awareness of you. But since I set out to make WP Sessions as a for-profit business, I thought it would be very poor taste to make my money on the backs of all these other people doing hard work. So from the very beginning, I said, I want to pay you for your time, and it's not a lot. It fluctuates. Right now, it's about $200 for a presentation, but it's a dinner out. It takes care of their hour on Saturday. It does not, of course, accommodate however many hours it took them to prepare the presentation. It's more of just a kind gift, I guess, than a real bona fide payment. For courses, of course, I pay a lot more because that's just a full-on commitment. I need them to produce 2 hours of finished content, and I want that to be extremely top-notch. But I personally would want anyone asking me to come and speak for an hour at a time for the profit of their business to do something kind. So that's what I did.
I approve of this message. So your memberships, do they cover the cost of, I mean, are the memberships designed just to cover the operating cost and paying the speakers, or do you have a longer-term goal of making WP Sessions a full-time income source?
My long-term goal is to make WP Sessions a full-time income source, so that in addition to having lots of great experts every month come and teach things, that I can also produce content, fresh new content every week, and put out lots of really good stuff, put together additional resources like ebooks and plugins and lots of training material. I have lots of hopes and dreams for that, and so the memberships help tremendously. They're, of course, a great value for someone to buy because it gives them access to a year of upcoming sessions as well as all of the past sessions and all of the courses that are only available to VIP members. And then it helps me to produce more content without assuming all of the risk. Right? So I launched them in July, and that gave me enough income to hire all of the experts that I needed for the next 6 months, which was fantastic. Which is how I was able to lock in all of the people that you would see on the courses page. And then I got a few more members, and I was able to lock in John James Jacoby to give a session, or a long-form presentation on BuddyPress, which I'm very excited about. That'll be coming out in the spring, I think.
All right. Let's see. If anybody has additional questions about WP Sessions, go ahead and tweet to GOH, #GOHchat, and we'll ask Brian. But until then, I want to talk about something extremely controversial here on Genesis Office Hours. I know. Watch out. Watch out. So, of course, the podcast is called Genesis Office Hours because we revolve around the Genesis framework. But lately here I've had on some guests that do not use Genesis, but you take it a step further. You actually have created your own theme framework with Startbox. So just kidding about the controversy part, but tell me a little bit about Startbox, if that was scratching your own itch or what the role is of that framework.
Yeah, so I wrote Startbox a lot of years ago now. I think it was 2008 when I created that, and it was definitely to scratch my own itch. In fact, the public didn't know about it for another couple of years after that, but I had found a theme called Sandbox, which blew my mind at the time. It had dynamic body classes and dynamic post classes, and of course every theme has this now because it's core WordPress functionality, but it wasn't. And so when I saw this, I thought, oh my gosh, I can make every single page look different just by altering the CSS. I don't have to change the markup at all, and I can have completely dramatically different looking sites all using the same base template because it's marked up in such a sane manner. Not all of, the majority of themes at the time had extremely custom markup, and they were very weird, and their class structure was funny, and So when I saw Sandbox, my eyes were opened, and then I found that I was making a lot of the same adjustments over and over and over again. So I thought, well, this is dumb. Why don't I just make those directly to Sandbox and rename it, and that can be my starting point. And so I called it Startbox, and I used that for 2 years on my own before I finally realized, hey, I bet lots of other people would want this really handy tool that I made. And just before I launched, Studio Press announced Genesis, and so they beat me to the punch in launching. And of course, they're the far more successful, far better documented, far more popular framework. But still, I liked the way that I was doing things, so I kept using my own thing. And then the main difference between the two is that Startbox still exposed all of the markup in each of the template files, whereas Genesis locks it away. So every template file you have just has the Genesis function, and that drove me batty because I like being able to see what's actually happening in the page. And so I have hooks everywhere, so you can still manipulate things without manipulating the template. But if you wanted to manipulate the template, right, you could just clone it to your child theme, edit the bits that you need, and then you're good to go. You don't have to work with hooks and filters if you don't want to, or if it's faster to not to, you're good to go. Now I can appreciate the differences and the approach that Genesis has taken. In fact, because I had to change the template files so rarely, it wasn't a true benefit. But the benefit there is for people who are learning, right? It's immediately familiar to see, oh, okay, here's the markup, here's what's going on. And then I went to WebDev, and they approached me about acquiring it, and I said, absolutely, let's do it, because they were interested in getting into products, and this was a great way to jump into that. And then we ended up with way more important client work than we did when they said, let's do this. And so it's kind of just fallen out of anyone's attention since then, which is sad but understandable, because at this point now it's 4 years older than it was, and not quite as relevant in terms of what it was doing.
I've noticed on there that you have two options. You have a 1-year access to Startbox and the themes for $100, or for just $50 more, complete lifetime access. Was that the original pricing model, or did that evolve over time? And
that evolved quite a bit over time. At launch, I think it was a $175 package for Startbox and 6 themes, and then after a year or so, I released Startbox itself for free, so that anyone could just pick it up and just start making awesome stuff, and started charging exclusively for the child themes and then the support, and broke it up so you could buy child themes individually and then still had the theme package. And then the upsell from just getting a year to getting it lifetime, of course, is good marketing, because people recognize this is actually a significantly better deal than if I were to buy this even for just 2 years. And that seemed to work. Value-based pricing.
Yeah, there's been lots of discussion on this podcast too, and just generally in the WordPress community about sustainability when it comes to pricing plugins, themes, and generally your WordPress products, and making sure that the cost of the product covers the support and all those elements that go into it. So.
Yep.
All right, and I do like that you I don't want to say go out of your way, but you make it very clear over on the startbox.com that it is GPL. The code itself is free, and what you're charging for is the support and updates, which with all the GPL debates and should you really charge? How can you charge for something that's GPL? I like that distinction that the cost covers support, not necessarily the code itself.
Yep. Just so we're clear, anybody, don't rush out and buy yourself a copy of Startbox right now, because it is not under active development, and there are lots of more recent theme bases that have come out, like underscores, that have a lot more utility to them. So don't want anyone to be disappointed because they heard about how great and awesome and fun this was, because I had a lot of fun building it and made a lot of really cool things with it, but now it's not really a focus of anything because underscores is so great and so versatile.
We have a question from Jackie while we're on the topic of frameworks, and do you have any thoughts on the future of theme frameworks in the WordPress ecosystem?
I do not think they're going away. I think the way that we'll see them sold and bundled will change. In fact, one of the transitions we were making before ultimately setting down and stopping development on Startbox was to pull out its core components, and we were going to call that Startbox Core, like Tadlock has Hybrid Core, and we would just put that inside of whatever theme we wanted and gain all of the functionality that Startbox had, but have our own freestanding parent theme, or not even parent theme, but just original theme that we could modify directly. Because one of the realizations that we had made is selling child themes kind of stinks, because as an end user who's buying a child theme, if you modify the child theme, you no longer have the original product, but you can't make a grandchild theme, so you're kind of stuck in this weird limbo. And of course, there's ways around that, right? You can have, as a theme developer, you can build your stuff so that they can put all their customizations in a file that doesn't get nuked when your child theme is updated. I believe that's how Genesis handles it. And of course, you can also use tools like Design Palette Pro, which is way awesome, by Norcross and J.J. Eaton and all the awesome, cool people at Reactive. But I think what we'll see is a lot more people selling standalone themes, and they'll still be powered by a framework, but you won't conceptualize them as that. It'll be internal. Like Woo Themes, of course, has the Woo framework that powers every single theme that they release, and that's been true for almost the entirety of their existence. Maybe not in the first year, but every year since. And it's just smart, right? Because as a developer, you have the same code base to maintain across all of your products. So I think we'll probably see them marketed more as just strong standalone themes.
I'm going to take this opportunity, since you mentioned grandchild themes, to make a public service announcement that you do not need grandchild themes. Somebody posted a YouTube video for the Genesis community on basically talking about creating a grandchild theme for the purpose of exactly what you mentioned, that the child theme, if you modify it, that's no longer the original product. So if you ever update it, all your customizations are nuked. But the idea with those child themes is that you make them your own. You don't update them. You've made it into your own product essentially. So the concept of making a grandchild theme is just kind of silly. Don't do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Never try to make a grandchild theme.
End PSA there. We have a question from Ben going back to WP Sessions, and he wants to know, are WP Sessions just about WordPress itself, or will it also take in related areas such as designing and Sketch?
Yes. So the focus, of course, is WordPress, but it's not strictly WordPress. We had, I think it was earlier this summer, Chris Lemma and Corey Miller and Andrea Middleton all came on to talk about giving an amazing WordCamp presentation, which is WordPress related, but not WordPress development. I've got, as I mentioned, Zach Tolman is going to be giving that course on performance-related things, and a lot of what he has to talk about isn't actually WordPress itself, right? It's about making the right adjustments to your server, insofar as you have control, and making the right changes to how your content goes. And it's all related to what we're building with WordPress, but it's not strict WordPress techniques. So once again, long answer to say, yes, it is WordPress themed, but we delve into things that are related and relevant to WordPress, such as Grunt in the last session that I just did.
Excellent answer. I like that one. We have a question from Michael, and he says, as someone who's blind, video training often does not offer the info needed to fully comprehend. Are sample documents or code provided to supplement those videos on WP Sessions?
Yes, mostly. It varies from session to session, and this is one of the things I need to go back through and improve upon because I've got more time to do so now. But in most of the episodes, I go and get the slides from the speakers, and we include those links. In several of the cases where they've done fairly deep code-heavy dives, the speakers have posted their code to GitHub. We did one on Backbone in January, and all of the guys who were on that contributed their code publicly via GitHub so that everyone could download the repo and follow along, even as things were happening live, which I thought was pretty cool. So you could be looking at the code base on your own computer. But it is not true for all of them, and that is something I want to change. I also want to go through and add in transcriptions. I've got a lead on a good transcription service, but I've been afraid to pull the trigger and send them a lot of money and then find out that they can't actually transcribe technical audio because they don't understand it. But I just need to bite the bullet and try it once.
Are those transcription services automated, or is it someone literally?
It's a real human.
A real human, not those fake humans.
None of those fake ones. Yeah, and they charge by the minute. So what I'm going to do to minimize my risk is to just take maybe a 10-minute segment that has a good variety of things and send them that and see how they do.
Sounds like a good trial run.
Yeah.
Take a little break here. If you've joined us late in the show, I am chatting with Brian Richards, a.k.a. at Risen on Twitter, RZEN, and we are chatting about his original theme framework called Startbox, his current business called WPSessions.com, and just in general, all kinds of good stuff. If you have a question for him, you can, oh gosh, my phone is ringing. If you have a question for him, you can send it in on Twitter to #GOHchat. All right, so back to our regularly scheduled program. Hi, Brian.
Oh, hi. Good to see you.
Okay, so let's get back to kind of talking about your processes for your freelance work a little bit. I'm always curious to see what other people's workflows are. Can you talk about your local development environment?
Yeah, and shameless plug here, I just did a live session on this last weekend. I had to cut it short, unfortunately, because I've been sick, as I said, for the last week. And so the third part still needs to be recorded and broadcast. But my current local environment is just one that I spun up myself. I use OS 10, and that comes with Apache and PHP pre-installed, so the only bit that I had to install to get a full working web server was MySQL. And I've got detailed documentation on how I set that up on my blog at risen.net. I think if you just Google local OS 10 development, see if that pops up. It'll probably pop up #1 for me, yep, because I'm logged in as me. But that include Risen in there, RZEN. It'll be among the top results. And I wrote this because I got tired of reformatting and then forgetting how simple it was, because there's just a few key things that you need to tweak to make it work just right. But I really like Vagrant. I didn't for a while. I don't like, and there's still parts that I don't like about it. I don't like how slow it is in turning on, and I don't like how much of my computer's resources it uses while it's running. So that's why I still continue to just run in straight OS 10. But it's a lot of fun. I have augmented all of this with installing lots of really great command line tools, and that's mostly what I focused on in my session on Saturday, talking about how I used to hate the command line, but now I actually really, really love it because I found just a few tools that make the experience so good. I started using an app called iTerm2, and then instead of using Bash, I use Z Shell, which is flavored with OMyZSH or OMZ, and it is tremendously useful. Within there, I have a tool that allows me to see what directory I'm in as part of my command prompt, and then if it's a Git directory, it also shows me what branch I'm in, and then it's color-coded to show me the status. If there are changes to that Git directory that haven't been checked in, it's yellow, and then if everything's up to date, it's green. If I enter in a command and it fails, it turns red. It's really, really, really handy. And that has made me tremendously faster at what I do. Big fan.
Nice. So what is deployment like with Vagrant?
So for my deployments, I use a service called Deploy, D-P-L-O-Y. I think it's deploy.io. And that's actually provided by the good folks from Beanstalk. And Beanstalk started originally as a hosted SVN repository, and then they became a hosted Git repository. And one of their core features was automatic code deployments from Git commit. And then they pulled that part out and made Deploy. So if you've used Beanstalk, you'll notice that Deploy's deploy structure is identical to what's in Beanstalk. It's the same interface, it's the same everything. And the nice thing about Deploy, DPLOY, is that it uses whatever repository you give it. If you're hosting on GitHub, if you're hosting on Bitbucket, if you're hosting on any other number of private servers, if you can give it all the credentials, it can read the repository, and then it can push out code any number of ways, via SSH, via SFTP. It has an understanding of how Amazon works, so it has automatic configuration for EC2 instances, and so it's super simple. So whenever I need to deploy code, I just commit it to my repository and then push those changes to the remote repository, and then poof, they're automatically deployed to where they need to go.
You mentioned a really interesting distinction with Beanstalk, and just this week I was trying to figure out if there was a way to host my repository over on GitHub, but be able to use Beanstalk for deployment as opposed to hosting the repository on Beanstalk. And reason being that opening issues and tracking issues and making comments is, Beanstalk is not really meant for that.
Right. Beanstalk is meant for private teams, and they've got a lot of cool tools, but nothing along the lines of what GitHub has provided, which is brilliant for community.
So what you're saying is, if on deploy, you can do that. You can use a GitHub repo
Yep.
and then push to deploy. Okay, I need to check that out. There you go. Pro tip for the day.
Yeah, and Deploy is awesome because it's also free for one repository, regardless of whether it's a public repo or private repo. So you can try it out without any real risk.
Nice.
Which I like. And then the way that I use it personally is to have one branch that's dedicated for production that I just usually name prod, and anytime that needs to go out to the production server, I just merge in whatever changes and then commit that and push it out. And then anything that goes into master automatically deploys to my staging server. Really, really handy.
Nice. I like those kind of tips. Pardon me. Once again, I'm getting a little bit verklempt because, when we talk about code and deployments, it just gets me a little hot under the collar. We have a question from this woman. Her name's Katie, and she just wants to know about your family and if your family's awesome.
Oh man, my family is so awesome. You guys don't even know. In fact, I'm kind of afraid to talk about this publicly because I'm afraid they might be taken from me, or I'll make people really either depressed or super jealous just because of how much greater my family is than everyone else's. But I have an amazing family. My wife has been taking care of me all week because I've had the man flu, and we have 2 boys right now, a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old, and a 2-year-old could probably be better described as a human pinball. He bounces around from room to room, wreaking havoc everywhere he goes, and it's just amazing. He is so much fun and really cute, and I love him a lot. And we all get to stay home together all day, every day, because I work on the internet, and the internet is everywhere. And that supports us enough that my wife can then take care of 3 boys, me included, and it's wonderful.
So Daniel has a follow-up question. He wants to know, did Katie fluff your pillow left to right or top to bottom while she was taking care of you in your man flu?
Alternated from night to night, so it was adequately fluffed in each direction.
Good. And just a quick reminder, always flip the pillow so that you can experience the cool side of the pillow. That's critical to your
Yes.
health and well-being. All right. So, and where do we even go from there? Back to some questions about your workflow. Talk to me a little bit about your client onboarding process. So going through, that initial contact with the client to deciding that's a good fit for the project to, writing a proposal and getting the ball rolling. What's that look like for you?
It has looked different for almost every single client I've done. Let's see, what year is it? 2014. So in 10 years of officially doing this professionally, we won't count all the years that I did in high school because it was only really by hearsay and only had 2 clients throughout all of high school. But in 10 years, I've never actively gone out of my way to find a client. I've never marketed or advertised my business. People just happen to find me. And for all of you who that doesn't happen to, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to frustrate you by that. It doesn't happen a lot, so maybe you can find solace in that. It's very random and haphazard because I usually don't take on a whole lot of client work. And so the clients that I do find, I end up doing a lot of work for them. In fact, in the 2 years prior to when I was at Web Dev Studios, I ended up working exclusively for one client for 2 years. And I'd had them as a client for the 2 years prior to that. And I was just doing odd jobs for them here and there, and then they just started needing more and more and more work to the point where I said, all right, well, how about I act like I'm part of your team? And then I ended up actually being part of their team for a while, and then I had my own team within that for, I think, for one of the years that I was there, or maybe not quite one full year. But for the ones that do find me, for my first interaction, they've usually heard about me, or they've seen something I've done, or they have a question, and it becomes obvious to me pretty quickly that what they really want is someone that they can hire to solve a problem that they have. And on the times that I don't say no, because I say no an awful lot, not quite as often as Chris Lema. So if you Google people who say no a lot, he's going to outrank me every time. But for the ones that I say yes to, it's usually a very compelling project, something that I'm personally interested in, something that I really like, because I know I learned very early on in college, actually, that I would rather be happy than rich, because I was making extremely good money doing something that I really, really didn't like, and I wasn't able to enjoy anything because all of my time was going to this thing that I hated, and so I had all this money piling up that I couldn't use to do anything. It was just making me miserable. It's possible to do both, so don't feel like money is the true root of all evil, but as you're approaching clients, try as best as you can to take ones that you enjoy, because you will make much better work if you enjoy doing it, and you'll feel recharged at the end of the day instead of drained. And that's what agency work has been for me for the last 2.5 years, because the only clients that come to me are ones that have already been vetted and already fun, and we're already doing something cool. And even when I don't really like what they're doing, I'm still building some cool new solution that I haven't been able to do before. So to get back to the question of what's my onboarding process like. So they email me, I figure out what they want, I figure out that I can do it, so it's very informal. It's usually via email. Ask them a few questions. Do you have a budget for this? What's your time frame? What are your needs? Basically, what are you hoping to accomplish with this? Right? Nobody needs a new website design. They need more customers. They need to increase their sales numbers. And so I get to the essence of what they want, and then I figure out how I can help them do that, and then how much it will cost of my time to do that, and so therefore how much of their money, and if they like that. Originally I would send them contracts, and that saved me from getting burned a few years ago. I had a client who almost didn't want to pay me, and he was going to just wait as long as he could before I finally said, look, I have to turn off your website if I don't get paid this week. And I got paid right away from that email. Did that
So
really answer
you
the
made that
question?
sound like you don't do contracts anymore, or
It depends. So for the last, I've been in agency work, so I haven't had to pick up my own clients for a long time. And then for most of this summer, I was working for people that I knew personally, and I didn't need a contract for them because it was very low risk work. I know them. I've known them for years, so I was assuming no risk in building anything for them. But for everybody else, no, I definitely use a contract. For the bigger clients that I've worked on, they have their own contract, and so I've just sent in my revisions, like, yes, I'll sign this, but we can't do this part, we can't do this part. And then for the smaller ones, for people who I don't know, I've got my own, and it's just short. It's usually, I think it's 3 pages long. It just covers the basics, right? I'm not going to screw you, you're not going to screw me. Here's exactly what I am planning to do for this project. If it's not explicitly mentioned here, I'm not doing it, right? Because people will assume that you're also doing content entry because you're building the website, even though you didn't tell them you're doing content entry. It took me one project to make sure that bullet point was in. If it's not expressly stated here, assume that I'm not doing it.
Yes, I love the addition of bullet points. Each contract I write gets a new bullet point from a key learning from the last project. Switching gears a little bit, we have a question from the vendor, and he wants to know what's your view. We talked about this a little bit, but what's your view on current pricing for themes, plugins, and learning membership sites?
I think that they are all over the place. And when I was in college, I thought, man, these things are expensive. I can't possibly buy any of them. And of course, after I graduated and had a job and started doing this stuff for real money, I realized, wow, this is very not expensive compared to how long it would take for me to build even a fraction of what this is giving me, right? Like take Gravity Forms. Gravity Forms is it still $40 for a 2-site license? It's really cheap, whatever
Yeah,
it is.
it's cheap. I think the developer license is only like $150.
Yeah, and that's for everything. And so, like, if you consider how many hours it takes for you to build even just a contact form, but a contact form that will work flawlessly 100% of the time, and will log the entries in case they don't get delivered properly via email, and track stats about how many people are viewing it versus stuff, like, you're already burning through way more hours than you could profitably charge for when you could just instead buy Gravity Forms. So I think that a lot of the themes and plugins are undervalued for what they provide. Not all of them. Some of them are really simple things, little utilities, and for those I think the pricing is just right. Themes, same thing. I think $75 for a theme is completely reasonable because many hours went into producing a theme that is cross-browser compatible and beautiful, and you get all of that for what, maybe 1 billable hour or 2 billable hours, depending on how much you charge, or half of a billable hour if you're really good at what you do. And then you can build on top of that. That is an extreme shift in value, right? It puts a lot of control into your hands. And training is also all over the place. WP sessions, I've been charging between $25 and $30 for a live event. And they're usually 3 presentations to an event, so it's $10 per presentation. So it costs about as much as a WordCamp. Of course, far less than if you're traveling out of town to the WordCamp. And so you get to experience an actual presentation from an expert. You get to ask them questions and interact with other people and learn a lot more than you would just watching a recording for a significantly smaller portion than what you could hire any one of those people for even 15 minutes of their time. So in my mind, that's extremely valuable. And Lynda and Tuts Plus and Treehouse and Code School, they're all priced similarly. The one that I think is most far out from that is LauraCasts by Jeffrey Way. And he is a madman. He's charging $10, not even 10, I think it's $9 a month or $100 for a year. And he's producing a new 15 to 20-minute video every single day. And they're extremely high quality.
Wow.
If you've heard of Jeffrey Way, it's probably because you spent any time at Tuts Plus. He put out a ton of content. He was the content curator there for, I think, the first 2 years of its existence. And he has a high caliber of quality for everything that he does. But he's smart. He priced it at what would be trivial. Like, well, of course, I can pay $10 for a new lesson every single day, right? That's about what it costs to eat lunch out if you work in an office. And during your lunch hour, you could watch one of these things and educate your mind and learn just a lot more. I think it's brilliant. I don't know if I can get there, but I want to because I'm really inspired by that.
What's the URL on his site? Do
It's,
you know off the top of your head?
yeah, LaraCast, and it's Lara because it's for Laravel. And it's casts like podcasts.
All right.
And so it's not particularly relevant to WordPress, but he does have lots of cool stuff there. Like he's got a really in-depth series on using PHP Storm, for example, that's free for everybody and very useful no matter what you're coding. So there you go.
All right. We got one last question here, and we're going to go back to the question on contracts. Do you have a recommendation on a good boilerplate contract for folks that are just looking to piece one together?
I saw one a few years ago, but I don't remember where. In fact, I found a couple of websites that had lots of great boilerplate open source documents from contracts to policies, things like photo release forms and things like that. All of these things that every business needs in some capacity, or lots of different businesses need, that are just super generic and no one really needs to develop on their own. But unfortunately, I don't remember anything else about it. Not a name, not a URL, nothing. So.
Well, a fat load of help you were.
Yep. Big old goose egg.
Well, we're gonna wrap this up because we're coming to the top of the hour here. But want to thank you, Brian, and just remind anybody who is listening that you can catch these later on iTunes. And if you enjoy them, I would really love a 5-star review. If you hate them, I would appreciate that feedback as well, so that we can make the show better. Let's see. You can, if you want reminders of Genesis Office Hours, you can go to carriedills.com/subscribe, and every Wednesday or Thursday morning, I'll send you a little reminder for the show. So with that, we will wrap episode 39. And Brian, you don't have your lower third, so let's tell folks where they can find you online.
Yeah, so the funny thing about that missing lower third is because I do this every month, multiple times per month in some cases, and my lower third automatically shows up perfectly every single time. One time I'm on someone else's show, gone. No one even knows. And it's very frustrating. But I run WPSessions.com. You can find that on Twitter at WPSessions, or you can find me on Twitter at Risen, which is spelled R-Z-E-N, just those 4 characters. And yeah, that links you to everything else that I do anywhere else in the world.
Awesome. Well, Brian, I appreciate your time, and it's been a lot of fun chatting with you, and wishing you much success with WP Sessions. So,
well, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun being here. I appreciate it.
You betcha. All right, guys, and we will see you next week. Bye.